Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Planet Zoo video down in Southern Vines. Today we are hopping straight into a time lapse of us creating a shell around that first shop in the center of Picnic Plaza. So as you can see maybe behind me right there, I am using the pre-made temple that came with the DLC as inspiration, along with a little bit of inspiration from one of my previous builds. So I really wanted to stick with stone and really just make it look as temple-y as possible. So right here I am just duplicating them and moving them so that they clip as little as possible. With some items it's easier than others. These actually weren't too bad. So I'm just stretching them out to make sure that they cover the building and also more, because we do want this to cover as much of that weird gap in the pathway as possible. And I am doing this with the bricks that are able to be changed color, so that we can kind of pick the exact color that we want. The first color I tried was that kind of greenish gray from back in the first guest plaza, but it just didn't quite fit. So I tried to get it a little bit closer to that pre-made temple, and I think I came up with a good in-between shade for our temple here in the middle with the merchandise shop. And it was a little bit interesting trying to figure out how I wanted the front of this to look. I didn't want it to be just a straight up flat front. I thought that would be kind of jarring and it just wouldn't flow with the rest of the build. So I just did a slightly decreased slope, kind of like a step, in the front. So there was still some variation, but it wasn't too much that the guests are going to visibly walk through it, I hope. I do end up just taking out that front wall that I put in. I wanted to do something a bit more custom and 3D. So I came in with the shorter brick to get it lined up as close to possible with that window without cutting any of it or having it be kind of funky. And we're just filling in this gap as best as we can so that it looks like it is just fully stone. And then if you can see, it is clipping straight through the wall of the shop, which I think I realize in just a minute. There it is. So I took a look, and I couldn't really decide for a second which one looked better. I decided that it was better to see the stone than to have to figure out how to cover in that small gap in the front. And now we are just covering as much of it as possible. Again, that is a huge theme today. I had a little bit of trouble with that brick. It wouldn't go back as far as I needed it to get rid of that clipping. And for the roof, I just threw in a super basic stone roof. I tried like a gold plate, but I didn't know what else I was gonna do, so I just tossed that idea. But I did know that I wanted to get something a little bit more eye-catching detail-wise, so I did end up going with these gold corners, kind of like corner caps. Just try to line it up as best as possible. A little bit weird since they have a curved front and the temple is obviously more angular. I did have some trouble lining all of this up exactly, and it was right about here that I realized that somewhere along the road, this is not a perfectly made 90-degree build, but it's all good. We got it all worked out. We got it as straight as possible, and I think that it looks pretty cool. I like that it adds a pop of color and some texture and just something eye-catching. So this next part is strongly influenced by the pre-made temple in the back. The one in the back has these steps that come down along the sides for detail, and I tried to recreate that as best as I could. You may already see a problem, but it took me way too long to figure out that I had used the wrong stone. So I used the bricks that were not able to be colored differently. So we're gonna make this, and then we're gonna delete half of it, recreate it with the colorful blocks, and then delete and redo the other half. But I'm just trying to get everything as symmetrical as possible. Again, somewhere along the line, it's not quite perfectly lined up, so there is some variation between the two sides with these double stairs on them. I think that's all right. You can't really tell when you're just going about the game, and I think it still turned out pretty cool looking. I like it, at least. And it was interesting trying to figure out the degree to which I wanted these steps to incline. I started out with these teeny tiny ones, and I was like, well, this is going to reach the side of the temple before we even get halfway up. So I opted for these super tall, very shallow steps, because I thought that that would look really cool, and it would give enough of a difference between this part that pops out and the temple wall itself. And I think it was all right at this point. And this is when I realized that I could not change the color, and I was absolutely devastated. There was a full 15 seconds in the footage of just no motion, no sound, just completely devastated. But like I said, we just deleted half of it and, moved it over from the left side to the right side with the blocks that we could actually change the color of, and did the same thing and plop it back over there. So just replacing it piece by piece. And honestly, this wasn't such a bad thing in the end, because it did help me realize, just staring at this wall a bit more while I did this, that the stairs needed to be varied slightly more than the temple wall. I thought that the heights of the steps were just a little bit too similar. So we go in and add an additional one in between each step, and I think it just adds that nice pop of uniqueness, or variation, I should say, in between the two layers of this build. And again, we are just recreating what we already did. When we bring the steps over around to the other side is when I really noticed that it was a little bit wonky, and I'm not sure exactly how that happened or the best way to go about fixing it. I think I did an all right job. When we hop into the game at the end of the time lapse, we'll take a look at it and see if it's too obvious, and if it's not, then we're just gonna say it's good. But I really think that this build turned out pretty cool. I like the color. I like that it's not super tall. I wanted it to be a temple, but I didn't want it to be a very tall structure. I didn't think that would fit into the vibe that we had going here. And this is just me trying to make that gap in the pathway a little bit smaller, trying to fill in the corners, get it more, just a little bit rounder and smaller. It wasn't happening, so I was just like, well, you know what? Let's bring the building back in, but let's push it back and see if we can get the widest part of the temple over the widest part of the gap in the pathway. And I think we did it pretty successfully. It is covering nearly all of the path border, which is very nice, and it leaves us with not too much work to do to cover just those little corners that are still peeking through. So we get this all settled in and okay it, and then I just go through, make sure it's all connecting to the ground, because we are on a slope, which makes it a little bit weird to work with a building that has a just a flat bottom. It's not a sloped bottom. Um, and again, just trying to get it as perfect as possible with the little bitty details and the little bitty changes, and then going through and covering up that pathway the rest of the way, connecting it to the ground, making it look solid and believable. No floating buildings here, okay? No floating buildings. There are still just a couple last minute details and changes that I want to make and add just to make this build the best that it can be and really stand out. But I think that it turned out really well. I love it. Let's hop in and see it in real time. All right, everybody, here we go. Here is the merchandise store in real time outside of time lapse. I, again, think this turned out really, really well. I'm very proud of it. I do think that it needs something up top. I think it needs like a cake topper almost. We also need to fill in the spaces in front of it, and maybe that's about it. Well, maybe we could get some more trash cans around here, because the guests are so messy and they're just so inconsiderate. They throw their trash everywhere, like a bunch of jerks. I thought we could take some inspiration from our Southern Vines sign. So for this one, we used the pre-made temple ruins, pieced them as they were pieced together and stuff. I kind of maybe want to put like some foliage on top and I don't think I want to do gold since we have the corners gold, but maybe something along these lines. And I think the way to get these things to fit is to put those trees on top. So let's take a look. Let's pause it just for a second. So I'm thinking that I don't want to go too big. But if we go too small, we're gonna have to put planters up top, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That might look more purposeful and more like zoo prop. Yeah, I mean, I think that looks kind of silly. It works up at the front of the zoo because it's like a ruined temple, whereas this is definitely much more put together, and I don't think a full tree would have grown on top of it. So let's take a look at the gardening. Get rid of this stuff. Let's check out the planters. Now, we'd want it to be all lined up, and we already have this little divot where stuff can fit. So let's just put a couple on here and see if we like it, see if it fits, or if it looks a bit out of place. It might. What if we lower it down and get them all lined up together? Let's leave this here, take a look at the plants, and we'll come back when we've got something clumped up in here that looks pretty cool. Maybe a little bit wild, but still purposeful. All right, so I ended up going a different route that I think is a bit more fitting. I took the planters away. They just weren't meshing with what we had going on. And I replaced, well, I didn't replace, I just put it on top of the roof. This like planted panel. I think it's really cool looking, actually. It would be a really good way to do an overgrown wall, I think. I think we will be using it again in the future. And then I just went through and added a bunch more plants on top of it, so that when you're down here, you can still see that like there's something going on. Just give it some more depth and just intrigue, if you will. And I added some of these little plants along the crevices in the corners of the temple because they look like ones that could, just kind of find a crack and just start growing. And then I added in some of this super cool Spanish moss, which somehow I had never seen or used before that I know of. And just the classic vines, kind of like roots, just hanging from here, kind of like a little curtain, honestly. Next up, we definitely need to fill this space. And I think the coconut palms might be our best bet, because they leave a lot of visibility in like that middle, like that mid sight line, while still filling up this top area, you know? So I think we can get the really tall guy with the really cute wonky trunk and then the medium one in here, but just making sure that it doesn't cut into the walls or anything. Ooh, I think that looks pretty cool. And then we'll definitely have to fill in the gaps here and maybe bring in some fencing, probably from the other guest plaza. Actually, I bet if I go over here, we could just copy and paste it. Let's just make sure we're adding it to the right group. We don't want buildings on opposite sides of the zoo being all connected. And then, yeah, what if we just... There we go. Honestly, I think we got it. I do know, though, that I think I did it this way, where the horizontal poles were on the outside and the vertical ones were on the inside. I don't really know if it matters too much, but I think it's good to be as consistent as possible with, you know, some of the things that are just so similar. Here we go. We'll get there eventually. It's all good. And then we're gonna have to go into this little fence specifically, move the horizontal ones to the outside and blah, blah, blah. We will do that. We'll do that in a second. That doesn't seem really exciting right now, but plants is absolutely exciting. I don't want to go too big and block everything that we've made with this temple, but I do want it to be pretty full. And then maybe some of these guys, just trying to use some of the same stuff that we used up top, just to bring in the similarities and just to tie everything together as best as we can. I think that looks pretty decent. And maybe some of these guys. They are my favorites. Oh, when it comes through the fence, that's cute. But yeah, let's just fill in this area, fix that little bamboo fence, and then make sure that it's something that we're into and that is what we want to create here. There we are. That is really cool. Oh, I also added in some of these torches, some of these lamps, and a couple of them are maybe a little bit sketchy, but we can always just pretend that it's fake fire. But when I first found these over here, when I put them here, I said that I wanted to put them all over the zoo, and we are definitely going to be doing that because I think they are just awesome. The zoo as a whole absolutely needs more lighting, and up here just needs everything still. So next episode, I think we are definitely going to get back to working up here. We're going to do the education boards, we're going to do the benches, the trash cans, the lighting, all of that important stuff that needs to get done, but that I just was not feeling after spending so much time up there. So let's do a little bit of that, and I think having some up here might be a bit too much. We can always hide some lighting to light up this, or add in an awning over where they would queue up, which
seems like a pretty good idea. I'm not going to add anything over close to these buildings yet because I'm not sure what kind of shells they're going to have. They're definitely not going to be temples. They're going to be more along the lines of just regular buildings, similar to what we did in the previous guest plaza, which I think will fit really nicely in with the temple that we have made today. But as it gets dark, I really want to show you all what the picnic plaza looks like with all of the lighting and all of that stuff, and the statues look super cool at night. I am wondering, as I'm building stuff, I'm kind of thinking ahead to like what I want to do with it as we go forward. I want to get a sign in, and I think I'm gonna call this Picnic Plaza because that's just what I've been calling it, and it's fitting. It's a bunch of picnic tables. It very much feels like you're just out at a park when you're in here, I think. And similar to how we did Paradise Plaza, I think is what we called it, back over here, I want a big sign as people come in with a bunch of lighting and all of that, just to really attract people. All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look. See if we can walk through. So first off, the camera flares are awesome. But if we get in here, I definitely want more lighting around the tables themselves, but it definitely is a good start, and the statues just look really cool with this lighting. Look at the tapir and the rhino, the babirusa over here, and the pangolin, the macaque, just its butt, but from out here you can see him a little bit. But yeah, next episode we will definitely take a break on this and go up here, because this stuff needs to be done, and as not great as this looks, it can wait, but people need benches and all of that stuff up here, and the animals have to have education boards and donation bins so that we're not going in the red, especially since this more than doubled our zoo. So we will do that, and maybe put in some more lighting down along here if we're feeling in the mood. It really needs to get done so that it looks more like a zoo at nighttime instead of just something that I want to skip through. But that is definitely all I have time for today. This little guy down here was very, very labor intensive. Let's find someone we haven't hung out with in a while. Maybe the giant anteaters. There we go. Well, thank you everybody for watching. This has been Hot Snake, and I will see you in the next episode of Planet Zoo Southern Vines.